The NFL playoffs have arrived. Last year, my bracket was perfect until the AFC and NFC championships, and then I got everything wrong after that. So this year, we're going to try and one-up that and get everything right. Starting off, over on the AFC, we have the Bills versus the Steelers. I don't think it's much secret that the Steelers are probably the worst team in the playoffs right now. They kind of snuck their way in at the very last second, and although they're a decent team, they're just not enough this year. I'm going to give this one to the Bills right away. Following that, we have the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Miami Dolphins. After looking up a little bit on these teams, I kind of realized that they're both frauds. Looking at the Chiefs' record, they are 1-4 against playoff opponents this season. And playoff opponents meaning teams that are in the playoffs that they've played already. They are 1-4 against them, and that is the third worst of all of the teams in the playoffs right now. That's only beaten by the Dolphins, who are 0-6 against playoff opponents this year. They have played 6 teams in the playoffs and have not beaten a single one of those teams. And both of these two teams are in the bottom 3 in that category. Now, the Dolphins are 4-4 in their last 8 games. The Chiefs are 5-3. That doesn't mean too much to me right now. But there are 2 things that are kind of selling this for me. And A, the Dolphins have a ton of injuries at the moment, and they're not going to be playing to their full potential. And B, it's Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, and anytime it's close, you got to give him the edge. So I'm going to give this one to the Chiefs. After that, we have the Texans versus the Browns. Now, both of these teams are kind of in the middle of the pack, and I really like how both of these teams have been playing recently. The Browns did beat the Texans a couple weeks ago, and it was not close at all. And I think this game will be a little bit closer, but I think it's going to be the same result with the Browns coming ahead. Over to the NFC, we have the Dallas Cowboys versus the Green Bay Packers. And both of these teams are kind of similar in stats, 6-2 in their past 8 games, around .500 against playoff opponents, and they've kind of beat similar playoff opponents. Both teams have beat the Lions, the Packers beat the Rams, and the Cowboys beat the Eagles. So it's really a close matchup, and Packers always seem to put on a show against the Cowboys. So believe it or not, I'm going to give this one to the Packers. If the Packers defense holds up, I think they will beat them. But at the same time, if the Packers defense does not hold up, then it's going to be like a 47-28 point game with the Cowboys winning. And those of you getting mad in the comments, I'm sorry, your brackets have 0 upsets in them. Following that, we have the Detroit Lions versus the Rams, and kind of a cinematic game. These two teams traded quarterbacks a couple years ago, and the Rams benefited with a Super Bowl win, and now the Lions have won their division and have a chance to make a Super Bowl run. These two teams are kind of good on opposite spectrums if you look at it mathematically. The Lions, they're 5-3 in their past 8 games, done good. They're 3-3 against playoff opponents, middle of the pack, looks good. The Rams, however, have gone 7-1 in their past 8 games, but also are 2-6 against playoff opponents, with one of those against the 49ers not even being a real game. That's a tough stat to look over, but at the same time, if you look at their past 8 games, they beat the Browns by a heavy margin, and they barely lost to the best team in the league at the last second of the game. And so really, I think in these past 7 weeks, the Rams have gone back to their Super Bowl winning team identity, and they are not someone you want to mess with in the playoffs. Believe it or not, I'm going to have a 6 and a 7 upset here. Give me the Los Angeles Rams. And finally, after that, we have the Buccaneers versus the Eagles. And everyone knows that Jalen Hurts has gotten injured, and despite whether he played or not, if you look at Washington versus Michigan in the College National Championship, it's clear with our example with Michael Penix Jr. that you can't play with an injury. You're just not going to be the same team, and it's really going to be tough. It's not like the Eagles have even been doing good anyway. The Eagles have been 3-5 in the past 8 weeks, and despite having a good record against playoff opponents, recently they have just not looked like themselves. There's been a lot of rumors coming about what's going on behind the scenes, and a lot of people are unhappy, and it's just not a team fit for making a run in the playoffs. Give me the Buccaneers. Now for the divisional round, the first thing we have is the Bills versus the Chiefs. They played earlier in the season, and the Bills won by a close margin. However, the Bills have also been doing really good recently and kind of proving themselves to be a true playoff opponent, barely winning over the 2 seed in the playoffs, whereas the Chiefs have kind of just been struggling to hold themselves up high. I just think that this year's not their year. They'll probably figure it out by next season, but it's just not their time yet. And following that, we have a tough matchup. We have the Browns versus the Ravens. The Browns have found themselves some success recently, but I just think that the Ravens are too good of a 1 seed to lose in the first round, and I think they'll move on. Following that, we have the Buccaneers versus the Rams, and whether the Buccaneers or Eagles win, I just don't see either of these two teams as good teams. Both of them have been iffy in the past 8 weeks, and the Buccaneers are only 1-5 against playoff opponents. Even if they can beat the beat-up Eagles, I don't think it's going to be enough to beat beat the Rams, and the Rams will win here. After that, we've got the Packers versus the 49ers, and whether the Packers can have their miracle upset against the Cowboys or not, it doesn't even matter. If they move on here and play the 49ers are just too good for the Packers defense and will rip them to shreds. I'll have the 49ers moving on. Now for the final four. The Bills will play the Ravens, and this is tough because the Bills are 6-2 in their past 8 games. They're 5-1 against playoff opponents, and they've just been playing really well recently. The Ravens have been playing good all season, and they're the 1 seed. The Bills do have really good O&D lines, though. Despite Lamar Jackson's scrambling ability, I think that their O-line is just not good enough to hold up, and the Bills are going to be putting a lot of pressure on. I think the Bills are going to be able to come out of this game and make it back to the Super Bowl. And then we have the Rams versus the 49ers, and the Rams barely beat the 49ers, and everyone was kind of resting, so it's kind of hard to tell off the game they just played. But I think when McCaffrey and Debo and all of them are back, the 49ers coming out on top. And that leaves the Bills versus the 49ers in the Super Bowl. Both these teams 6-2 in their past 8 games, and 49ers are 5-3 against playoff teams, with the Bills being 5-1 against playoff teams. That's pretty equal in my mind, and it's really not even up to math right now. And I just think the Bills, even if they make the Super Bowl, it's just not their year to win it. And I think the 49ers, they have a very high-powered offense, Brock Purdy at the helm, and I think that they will pull away with their first Super Bowl victory in a long time. And so these are my predictions for the NFL playoffs. I know a lot of people are going to be mad because I picked some upsets here and there, but you got to realize that's what happens in the playoffs. And I guess we'll see what happens. This year, I would say it's a lot harder to predict than last year, and so I guess it's just a matter of time to see how well I did. If you did like this video, please do subscribe. It helps out a lot more than you think, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next video.